Records were tumbling in round 2 of the NRL as the Panthers equalled a 102-year-old defensive achievement, and Brett Morris became the first Australian to score a hat-trick of tries in consecutive weeks, as the Storm licked their wounds ahead of the grand final rematch. Who will finally move into the winner's circle and avoid an 0-3 start? Yes, hello and welcome back to the Sideline Chat podcast, a one-stop shop for rugby league. Connor Marcellus with you once again, and today we will do our NRL Round 2 and 3 debrief, and for the first time this year, our Round 1 preview of the Betfred Super League. Now, before we start, I should probably give my thoughts and my prayers on behalf of the Sideline Chat team to those affected in the flood areas around the mid-north coast and of Western Sydney. I just wanted to say, we know what are you going through, so you're not alone in this fight. Now, beginning with our round 2 wrap, we have the Parramatta Eels getting a surprise victory over the Melbourne Storm, 16 points into 12. Now, with the rain event we've been experiencing in New South Wales recently, this one proved to be wet, but not of diminished quality. I have to say, the Eels definitely did the job on the Storm's right edge with this. They definitely knew where to go to find tries, and of course Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses doing their part to help set Micah Sivo up on the right edge of it. It was definitely close, especially heading into the final 5 minutes when Justin Olam leveled the scores at 12 all. Mark sort of had the idea, as he's still on holiday at the moment, that he thought this was going to be more of a high-scoring game than what it turns out to say, but as he likes to say, low-scoring games are generally the most entertaining as it was, and it definitely showed. But I shouldn't be railing too much on the Melbourne Storm. They did expose the Eels' condensed defence when Remus Smith went over the score, or how they started out on the left, all of Parramatta's defenders were on one side, all Melbourne had to do, quick couple of cut-out passes, and they were able to expose the Eels' left side defence. So that's one thing the Eels need to correct ahead of this clash against the Sharks. But apart from that, there are more concerns for Craig Bellamy, considering that Felice Kapusi has been suspended, and that means the defensive stature of the Storm's right-hand side will be left at the mercy of the likes of Stephen Crichton, Jerome Luai, and Viliami Kikau when it comes time to face the Penrith Panthers in the grand final rematch. But like I said, Melbourne, they are a very good side, but I'm very concerned about their right edge at the moment, and we'll get more onto that when we talk about our round 3 predictions. But once again, with Micah Sivo, definitely the standout for the Eels. 2 tries, 1 line break, and 6 tackle breaks in that effort right there. Now, on to the first of the Friday night games. We have the Warriors going down to the Newcastle Knights, 16 points to 20. And another close game, moving out to the Central Coast this time. Considering Jaden Brayley's now scored his first try in what seems to be close to a year since his return from the ACL injury, the Knights sort of had the lead early, but some good forward play from the Warriors sent Murdoch Masila over for his first try since coming back into the NRL, and the scores were locked up at 6-all. Mitch Barnett, definitely a surprise with the goal-kicking boots. Many predicted that Tex Hoy would have taken the goal-kicking duties with Kalen Ponga missing, but it's definitely a surprise that Barnett's developing his skills as a second rower. Not many forwards have taken up goal kicking these days. I could probably name only 3 that have done so. One concern for the Warriors, their right edge defensively. With Hymel Hunt going over off the back of Bradman Best's breaks and try assist, the Warriors need to look back at their right edge and how exactly they're defending, as it was in the last 6 minutes that the Knights were able to get over the top of the Warriors defensively and set up the match-winning try for Hymel Hunt, his second career double, I believe it is. There's definitely a lot more work needs to be done for both sides. The Knights, it's goal line defense, and when it comes to forwards crashing their way over. And while I wouldn't say their left edge was completely exposed when Ken Mamalo seized the lead for the Warriors, but it definitely needs to be looked at there. But apart from that, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, always a standout for the Warriors, 218 running meters, 1 tackle break, and setting up 2 one of those being the Mamalo match-leading try for that point in the game. Mark's sort of thoughts on the idea. Here, they both got 3 tries apiece, but goal kicking would definitely need to come back into the equation on that. Moving on, the South Queensland derby between the Gold Coast Titans and the Brisbane Broncos. The Titans coming away 28-16 victors. It was definitely challenging early on. It only took the first 20 minutes for the Titans to finally get over, but the Broncos were able to come back in kindness. The strategy of kicking for Xavier Coates, as Brodie Croft demonstrated when Coates set up Tessie New in the corner, that is a bit of a strategy the Broncos have used in the past. Just take advantage of the height of Coates against any opposition winger and then hope for the best on that. While the Broncos were able to score twice in the second half to make the game a bit competitive, it was described as too little, too late for them. The Titans now registering back-to-back wins over the Broncos, their 3rd straight in 2 years, and it was done very comfortably by the end of it all. No surprises here that David Fafita was a standout in this one. He ran for 136 metres, he had 8 tackle breaks, and of course, scoring those 2 tries in his first game against the former club there. I think the only blemish for the Titans is because there's no way you could defend the way Tessie New scored. No way. But allowing Pangai Jr. to score off a tap restart, that really needs to be addressed by Justin Holbrook. You should not be allowing complacency when it comes to a tap restart. If Pangai Jr. did that every other week, he'd have more tries than, well, God, who knows. But that's something the Titans need to get together. Tighter defense off the back of a tap restart. But apart from that, the Titans did well. And I think this gives good promise for them to register back-to-back wins against the Cowboys when they meet this Sunday night. Now, the blemish of the round. Panthers, while it's not for them, it's the blemish. It's the Dogs that is the blemish. A big, fat 0 for them. But it was not. That's not to knock the Penrith Panthers, who have achieved a great team record by equaling the defensive record set by the Eastern Suburbs Roosters, or the Sydney Roosters as they are known as today, from 1919, where they went for 3 regular season matches without conceding a single point. I think this is absolutely believable that a team could equal a record set last century, and that's exactly what they did. Viliami Kikau proved to be a danger on the Panthers' left edge, and despite spirit from the Bulldogs' side to last almost an hour at 10-0, unfortunately it fell apart within the final 20 minutes. Defense needs to be Trent Barrett's priority number 1 ahead of the first away trip to face the Broncos at Suncorp Stadium, because missing 51 tackles is not good. Not at all. And I can't really say there was a standout in the Dogs' side. It's easier to say Viliami Kikau when you look at 2 tries, 150 running meters, 3 line breaks, and 6 tackle breaks. I watched that game between Canterbury and Penrith, and I just didn't think the Dogs had anything to throw at the Panthers. They had that Nick Kotrick try that was taken away. Corey Allen try, but then that was disallowed for, I think it was a knock-on it was disallowed for, but apparently Falcon is a knock-on these days. That's just my opinion on the matter. Another problem for Canterbury, we lost Dallin Watene-Zelezniak for the next 2 weeks, following him trying to take Nathan Cleary's head off. But, they were a player down when they let in 2 tries, but that should not be allowed to go 0-1. And we've got to find, and it's up to the Dogs to try and find a way to break down defensive walls in the future on that play. If you want to be competitive, not just against the top teams, but against anyone in general on that. Now, the Manly Seagulls. Where does Manly go from here? Blown off the park by the Roosters in round 1, and then it seems they were unable to chase down the Rabbitohs in round 2, as the left edge of South made Manly pay for poor defenses entered reads early with Cody Walker, Alex Johnston, and Latrell Mitchell all going over there. Of course, there was that controversy with Mitchell getting sin-binned. Personally, I had a look at it. Cherry Evans acted for it. It was worse than that time about 4 years ago when Paul Gallen dove and he got a penalty. I think the joke was that he got an Oscar for the best dive of the year while denying the Tigers a try in that game at Leichhardt Oval. A big challenge, I would think, for the Rabbitohs is the Roosters' lethal right-hand edge. They do come up against each other on Friday night in a grudge match to end all grudge matches. And with Victor Radley coming back, the Rabbitohs need to do two things in this game to try and go for 2-1. First, contain the right-hand edge that has Tedesco, Luke Keary, Joey Manu, and especially the fastest try scorer in the NRL at this point, Brett Morris, with those consecutive hat-tricks he scored, and I'll touch more on that shortly. Manly, meanwhile, the right edge again. It's a recurring theme, but this needs to change. We cannot have a Manly right edge conceding tries every other day. I would think it's amongst the worst defensive edges in the NRL at this point in time. And with the Dragons riding high off a confidence win in following their win over the Cowboys and finding a winning formula that seems to work, Manly need to overcome this, as well as find players that can actually field the side at this point in time. They can't afford to wait for Tom Trbojevic any longer. They need to make some changes. Obviously, Dylan Walker at fullback is not working. They need to make the changes fast, or by the time they face Penrith on the beginning of the Easter round, they could be facing a potential 0-4 start heading into the Easter period. So they need to be able to tighten up their right side defense, as well as find a way to break down opposition defensive lines. But on the upside, they have been able to pull middle defenses out of position, Lachlan Croker diving over from dummy half, and then Marty Tapau scoring off a good offload from Taniela Paseka to score a second try that made it 14-12 in the second half. But defense and being able to attack is Manly's main goals ahead of this one. Now, final game of Saturday night. The North Queensland Cowboys and the St. George Illawarra Dragons. 13-6 half-time scoreline as Corey Norman converted from inside the 40. I honestly thought, oh no, not again. As there is the precedent that if a team kicks a first-half field goal, they often go on to lose. But thankfully, it did not go that way, and the Dragons actually looked like they were capable of repelling the North Queensland Cowboys, despite their challenge early on, as they were going tit for tat between the two sides. The Cowboys' errors, Mark says, they made at the wrong time when they could have looked like troubling the Dragons. Meanwhile, the Dragons made errors in bad field position, which gave the Cowboys good field position. But owing to St. George Illawarra, their defense was a shining light in this, and Ben Hunt was in total control in this game. And much maligned he has been over his entire career, but this time he actually looked pretty good here. 1 line break, 2 try assists, and 4 tackle breaks, not to mention the try he scored off the back of Andrew McCulloch to win the game for the Dragons 25-18. Definitely some confidence boosters for the Dragons right there. I think if they can stick with this formula they've done, I think they can go on and beat Manly in this one. As for the Cowboys, where do they go from here? Sure, they attacked, which is a confidence booster, and Isan Masters proved to be very dangerous with the ball, with 5 tackle breaks and 4 offloads, but they need to get Michael Morgan firing. And I know there's all this talk about this. Should he move to halfback? Should Valentine Holmes go to fullback? I'm just going to say it. Morgan's not a halfback, but he needs to up his game, especially with the criticism Ben Hunt cops, sort of that contrast that, because Hunt's at St. George Illawarra, he cops all the criticism, but somehow Michael Morgan's immune from all this criticism, and they're just like, just give it a sec, he'll go on that 2017, 2015 run again. It's not going to happen. The Cowboys are in collapse. He needs to step up and act as an anchor for Jake Clifford so he can run the show here. But whether or not the Cowboys can do that in time, or considering they are facing the Titans this Sunday night, that's got to be the big kicker for them at the moment. Now, the West Tigers going down to the Sydney Roosters, 6 points to 40. The left edge was absolutely diabolical for the Tigers as Brett Morris scored his second hat-trick as in many weeks, becoming the first Australian Rugby League player to do so. Good on him. He was definitely the beneficiary of Luke Keary having the ball on a string. And the Roosters were not troubled, but it would be wise to tighten up their middle defence as Jacob Libble was able to dive over from dummy half. But other than that, it was a Roosters field day through and through, and James Tedesco also backing up with a double as the dominance of the Roosters shone through. And good news, and a little bit of a good highlight for Fletcher Baker, scoring his first try on debut, who off a Lindsay Collins pass. Yes, front rower with passing skill. I'm pretty sure that was just in good field position at the right time, but yeah, you never know. Forwards can have many talents. And apparently Tedesco can properly goal kick from close range. A little bit more practicing for Teddy out wide. We'll see how he does at taking over goal kicking full time if Trent Robinson asks him to. It shouldn't be all railing against Joey Leilua out on the Tigers' left edge. The rest of the left edge was diabolical. And as for Luke Brooks, they need to get his kicking game in order to prevent further gifts of 7 tackle sets for the opposition side coming out of trouble. And of course, Brett Morris there, 3 tries in as many weeks, 1 try assist, and he ran for 220 metres. And a shining light for the Tigers, however, Dane Laurie at his second start since coming over from Penrith, and he has not failed to disappoint on these matters. He ran for 130 metres, he had 9 tackle breaks, and 1 kick for 14 metres. Yes, so the axe has to be swung, and we'll elaborate more on that axe being swung when we do our round 3 predictions. But they need, as Mark says, the Tigers need more time to gel, or they should start gelling now before the axe gets swung over the top of their heads. Otherwise, it's just going to be a long season of playing catch-up football. And considering how good some sides have gotten as others have slipped, this could be trouble for the Tigers. And finally, wrapping up our round 2 debrief, the Canberra Raiders 12, the Cronulla Sharks 10. Well, this Sharks and Raiders rivalry, this has really developed into a grudge match. I tell you what, that 2016 qualifying final has really started some things between the two sides. Namely, it started the Sharks' poor run of form against the Raiders, and that has continued again and right here. But not the way you believe it has. While the Raiders were humming early in both defence and attack, George Williams and Josh Hodgson proving very dangerous. First going at the Sharks' right edge with Sebastian Kris, then going back through the middle to send Hudson Young flying over at Matt Moylan, which definitely he proved to be successful on some parts, going at Moylan, right up until the part Moylan decided, you know what, I've had enough of this bloke running at me all night. I'm going to force an error upon him. And then it turned into a bit of a scuffle. The Sharks, they were definitely spirited when they started getting back into the game. Ultimately, they exposed the Raiders' weakness for conceding tries off kicks, as highlighted by their trial performance against the Roosters back earlier in March. But the problems of 2019 continue to raise their heads as the Sharks' inability to convert opportunities off the boot cost them dearly. I think everyone knows, had Townsend converted those tries and penalty goals he missed, the Sharks would have been up, say, anywhere from 14 to 16 points to 12 over the Raiders, and they would have on 1-1 in towards the top 8. But apart from that, the Sharks, they just need to work on their goal kicking and being able to stick with the good side for as long as they can. And if this is the blueprint provided, then they need to show it against the Eels on Saturday night. As for the Raiders, they were definitely scrappy as the completion rate and the error count Both went in opposite directions of the other. But the good news for the Raiders, Jared Croker is back this week as he strengthens the left edge attack over time, and his goal kicking will provide a huge relief for George Williams, into having not kicked for 4 years at this point. He has now come out and done a very good job being handed the goal kicking for the first time in the NRL, and just proves the Raiders are developing depth wherever they go with it. Apart from George Williams' standout with his 1 try assist, 100% conversion rate, and forcing the 2 goal line dropouts, Toby Rudolph, he is definitely playing as he's screaming, "Give me an extended contract with the Sharks." 160 running meters, 2 offloads, and running for 12 hit-ups on that occasion. As Mark notes here, it definitely would have been a different story had the Sharks gotten over in the wet conditions, which they have, and if they actually converted on those opportunities. Canberra, as he also says, Canberra can keep doing Canberra things in Canberra. All right, I'm not sure what he means by that. I'm probably sure he means continuation of good form at home, humming attack, and strong defense as the Raiders have come to be known for. And Ryan James, this guy's only just going to keep getting better. Who knows? Maybe he might even force his way into the starting side very, very soon on this front. Now, that's our round 2 debrief. We now begin with round 3. The Penrith Panthers against the Melbourne Storm. As for the Panthers, there are no changes for now. But with the concussion cloud still hanging over Nathan Cleary, Matt Burton could still be called up from the reserves to be brought in for this. As for the Melbourne Storm, there have been a couple of forced changes. Felice Kaufusi out for the next few weeks, so Tom Eisenhuth has been given the starting second row berth. Kaufusi would have been. Aaron Penne comes onto the bench for Tyson Smoothy, and Nico Hines is the new bench utility as well. Well, 2020 Grand Final rematch, and these things always go off with a cracker. Another interesting trend of this, I believe, of the last 8 Grand Final rematches, is the Premiers have actually lost on 2 occasions. It could be 3, I'm not entirely sure, but the 2 I am definitely aware of on this front. 2016 Grand Final rematch on Good Friday, the Broncos getting up over the Cowboys. And even last year's when the Raiders beat the Roosters at the SCG in that classic of a round 10 matchup there. Even if Cleary doesn't play, the Panthers still have their left edge humming as Jerome Luai is really running the show on that left edge. And if Crichton, To'o, and Kikau go with him, then Melbourne's right edge is really going to struggle with this. Mark believes that there will be a very close game on the cards and both teams are in form, but it really comes down to see if Cleary does play or if he doesn't. And this will determine the results, but he reckons the Melbourne Storm will get the upper edge as it will come down to the experience on the park, and he says the Storm will win by 4 at a 1-12 margin. Honestly, I'm looking at this. I looked at the results over the weekend. The one concern, if Cleary doesn't play, will be the goal kicking. But then again, they do have Stephen Crichton, who has demonstrated to be very successful with his conversion rates, and not to mention Paul Momirovski, which could come into play if Cleary isn't there either. I don't really see any weakness in this Penrith attack or defense at the moment, and I'm finding it really hard to decide who's actually got the upper edge on this front, but I'm going to go with a little bit of the opposite way. I think Penrith are going to come away with a 1-12 victory on that front. So one going the Melbourne Storm, the other going the Penrith Panthers. Now, moving on, we have the St. George Illawarra Dragons up against the Manly Seagulls in your first Friday night fixture at the 6 o'clock time slot. Manly forced into a couple of changes. Andrew Davey unfortunately ruled out for the rest of the season due to an ACL injury. So Jack Gajewski is back in the starting pack, and Josh Schuster gets a start in the second row despite being a 5'8" /halfback. And the other addition on the bench, Morgan Boyle, has been added to the bench And as well with as for the Dragons, there have been no changes to the side that ran out 1-17 against the North Queensland Cowboys, and will be looking for back-to-back wins for the first time this year. It was definitely a brilliant performance by St. George Illawarra. It could have gone either way, but to the good work of Ben Hunt and Andrew McCulloch, they were able to repel the Cowboys' defence. And considering Manly and North Queensland currently share something of a similar attack, I think the Dragons are very capable of backing this up again. As for Manly, something needs to change. At the moment, Dylan Walker is still named at fullback, but who knows if Des Hasler might swing the axe as well. Also, Taniela Paseka has been promoted to the starting side, and Josh Aloiai has dropped to the bench. That was the other thing I forgot to mention there. Marcus sort of mentioned that Manly have lost their second game straight, but they have been playing against two teams that made the finals last year. But considering that confidence and momentum isn't on the Sea Eagles side, and as they are down at the moment, it won't help them against the Dragons side, who are full of confidence. And after a gutsy win against the Cowboys, he's in dry football conditions. He says that the Dragons will run out 18-point winners at a margin of 13+. Well, that's a really bit of a confidence there. All it takes is one win. I got to agree with Mark about the Dragons winning, but I'm going to say the Dragons get up on a 1-12 margin. I don't think Manly are that terrible defensively at the moment. The one thing the Dragons will need to keep an eye on is their defence right on the goal line if Manly try their crash plays again. But I think the kicking game of Ben Hunt to set up either Zach Lomax or Michaeli Ravawala, that will be the Dragons' strength right there. And the Dragons, as I have said, will run out 1-12 victors on that front. All right, here we go. The biggest match of the round. Well, besides the grand final rematch. But equally the biggest match, your traditional grudge match for the Friday night slot. The South Sydney Rabbitohs and the Sydney Roosters. The Roosters are welcoming back Victor Radley, who will start off the bench as Fletcher Baker drops out. Nat Butcher also drops back to the bench with the return of Angus Crichton to the second row. Otherwise, those changes mean the Roosters are still intact overall. As for the Rabbitohs, unfortunately, Jackson Paulo drops out due to concussion at the moment, and Josh Mansour gets a reprieve out on the right edge. The Rabbitohs otherwise unchanged from those. Well, Rabbitohs left edge, Roosters right edge, colliding at the same time. Who's going to come out on top? Well, this is definitely going to be mouth-watering, and as Mark has given his opinion, it will be game of the round in his view. The Roosters have had two massive wins in the first 2 weeks, while the Rabbitohs have built some confidence off the back of beating Manly at Brookvale in the wet conditions, and he says that trying to predict a winner will be extremely difficult. That's what they said about getting the NRL started back up again after last year. But look what happened. They started back up again. Mark's gut, he's going on a gut opinion at the moment. His gut is telling him to go with the Rabbitohs in a golden point game. So he's going to predict the first golden point game of the year. And they will win by a 2-point field goal by Adam Reynolds. So he is predicting a Rabbitohs 1-12 victory. While I'm inclined to think that the Rabbitohs left edge is humming nicely between Walker, Mitchell, and Alex Johnston, the Roosters' right edge just looks like it's on another planet. I mean, not to mention the fact Joey Manu hasn't got onto the groove yet, but I tell you what, once Manu does get into the groove, oh, you better be careful when you're playing the Roosters. I'm going to say it's a 1-12 victory, but I'm going to swing in favour of the Roosters on this one. I think the return of Victor Radley and his ability to ball play in the middle of the field will give the Chooks the edge over the Rabbitohs, and they will be out for revenge with 60 points to 8 on their mind right there. Now, starting with our first of the of the the Bundaberg Super Saturday triple header, the Canberra Raiders against the New Zealand Warriors. A big blow for the Warriors, with Chanel Harris-Tavita ruled out for the next 3 months with his left foot fractured. Also, Jermaine Tanoa-Brown has been suspended for 3 weeks due to a crusher tackle. So Sean O'Sullivan comes into the halves alongside Cody Nikorima, and Bunty Afoa is promoted to the starting side alongside Adam Fanua-Blake and Wade Egan, with Jack Murchie getting his first game of the year off the bench. One change for the Raiders on the other side of the equation, and unfortunately, Sebastian Chris dropped out after 2 good weeks in the centres because Jared Croker is back in the starting line. The Warriors definitely need their right edge addressed, and they're still stuck in Australia up until June, so there is still a lot of incentive for the Warriors to do well, But after a narrow loss against Newcastle, where that game could have gone either way, Mark reckons that heading to the nation's capital isn't going to help their cause again for the Warriors, as Canberra are going to be way too strong for the New Zealand outfit. So he reckons in a fair contest, the Warriors are going to lose to the Raiders 14 points. So he's predicting a Raiders 13-plus win there. It would all depend on the weather conditions, to be all honesty. At the same time, the Raiders' completion rate and defense were very scrappy in the second half, and they did almost end up losing to the Sharks. At the same time, the Warriors do seem like they have the forwards to meet up with the Raiders pack, but I'm going to say at home, with the intimidation factor that Canberra possess, I'm going to say the Raiders get away with this win on a 1 to 12 points margin. Now, as I alluded to at the top of the show, who will enter into the winner's circle in round 3? Well, we begin with 2 of these sides, the Brisbane Broncos and the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs there. The Dogs have suffered a big blow with the loss of Raymond Faitala-Mariner. He's been ruled out for at least 5 months with injury. So Corey Waddell has been re-promoted to the starting side, and Joe Stimson will get his first game off the bench for the year. Meanwhile, in the back line, with Dallin Watene-Zelezniak due to miss the next fortnight, Tui Katoa comes in on the right-hand side for Trent Barrett. As for the Broncos, there are no changes to the side that ran out 12-point losers to the Titans, but Tom Dearden has been named in the reserves, and who knows if there will be a late-minute change ahead of kickoff here. Both sides are struggling in more ways than one. The Dogs made about 51 missed tackles the other day, so this will definitely be on their mind to tighten up their defense. Oh, and Jeremy Marshall-King has moved back into the starting side, with Sione Katoa dropping back to the bench. That's the other change the Dogs have made. The Broncos' right edge seems to be humming the best at the moment, between Tessie New and Xavier Coates, as well as Jordan Ricky having opportunities where he can. And they were very good against the Eels when they were sort of off the boil first up, but they just lost it at the back end and of that. And it's a similar story again. They just never looked like they could really challenge the Titans. All it took was one try from the Gold Coast, and the Broncos' heads went down. So the morale factor will heavily play on this, on who gets off to a better start. A bit of a confidence thing. I think the Dogs, despite not being able to challenge the Panthers defensively, they were able to get off to a good start against Newcastle, or by challenging by challenging Newcastle's left edge. And I think if they go after the Broncos' left edge in the same fashion they did with Newcastle all the way back in round 1, I think the Dogs can get away with this. Mark has ultimately said this is a battle of who is the better side, and he thinks it'll be the Bulldogs that have the team that can score the points and rise, while the Broncos' losing run of 13 will change to 14 games without a win, as they are struggling to defend and keep the leads. He has predicted, this could be very controversial, he's predicted the Bulldogs to be 18-point winners. Bulldogs 13 plus. As a Canterbury fan, my I'm ultimately inclined to believe that we could absolutely smash the Broncos at this point. But I got to be realistic. The Broncos could easily come back round with the stronger forward pack, as our forward pack has not been able to make a dent. But with the confidence factor in mind, all it takes is one try to disrupt the Broncos' mojo. So I'm going to say the Bulldogs win, but not a 13-plus margin. I'm going to say the Bulldogs win 1-12. And our final game of the Bundaberg Run Super Saturday, the Parramatta Eels and the Cronulla Sharks. A couple of changes for the Sharks, unsatisfied with Marwin Hiroti's performance over the weekend. So he has been dumped for Connor Tracy, the start in the centres, and Tague Wilton is the fresh man on the interchange there. Meanwhile, for the Eels, they have been forced into a change with the loss of Ryan Madison following the swinging arm from Felice Kafusi. Isaiah Papali'i has been promoted to the starting second row, and Ray Stone has been added to the bench. As I elaborated on in our round 2 debrief, the Sharks were definitely in the fight against the Canberra Raiders, but whether or not they can go with the Eels is another question entirely. With the statement during the week, I believe, from Peter Sterling declaring that Junior Paulo is the best front rower in the Premiership. A bit controversial, but what do you expect from a one-eyed Eels legend? No, I shouldn't be saying that. That's just a joke. Please don't cancel me. The Bankwest Stadium factor again. I know it's a cliche. Everyone's heard of the Bankwest Stadium factor, that the Eels are a different side at home. The only way I could see the Eels losing this is that they don't back it up against their performance against the Storm, against the Sharks. Ultimately, this will come down to sort of like, I would sort of say a sort of like analysis of one performance to the next. If you win a real close game and you'll lose a real close game, it's all about the energy levels, whether you can back up those energy levels the next week. And in some cases, it does work. Other times, it fails miserably there. As for Mark, he reckons the Sharks almost beat the Raiders last week in an extremely wet game, but fell short at the end of it, as there were positives out of that match that John Morris could take. But he also said the Eels did beat the reigning premiers at Bankwest Stadium in an upset, and he sees, as there is now going to be upsets, he reckons the Eels are going to thump the Sharks by 24, so he's predicting an Eels 13-plus win there. It's only energy levels I'm concerned of, and if the Sharks are able to stick with the Eels anywhere from 50 minutes up to an hour and 10 minutes or 70 minutes as it is in game time, I think there is an avenue that the Sharks could cause an upset, but otherwise, I'm going to say the Eels win, mainly just because of the Bankwest Stadium factor and their left edge of Papali'i, Mitchell Moses, and Micah Sevo. So I'm going to say the Eels win, but I see it as a 1-12 win. Now, moving on, we have the first of our Sunday games at the moment. It's the Newcastle Knights at home to the West Tigers. It's in the 4 o'clock game on Channel 9. The Tigers have had the axe swung against them. Joey Leilua, the first casualty of Michael Maguire's axe on 2020. He has been dropped to Western Suburbs in the Knock-On Effect Cup as James Roberts comes back from a niggling injury with Tommy Talau retained in the centres. Zane Musgrove also elevated to the starting lineup as Joe Offahengawi drops back to the bench, and Moses Mbai retains his place on the bench from last week. As for the Knights, Phoenix Crossland ruled out for the next 3 weeks due to a crusher tackle suspension. But the good news is Kurt Mann has been named to return at 5'8". Should he fail to be ready in time, Simi Asagi has been named in the reserves in jumper 21. Look, the Tigers' defence, I think everyone has seen what the Tigers' defence has produced. And believe me, this is not looking well at all for the Tigers. They have confidence in attack if they're not sending kicks dead, but Newcastle's defence and their left edge, especially between Bradman Best and Heimel Hunt, that's just going to be hard to break down. And this Knights side is on the up, considering that Kalen Ponga and Blake Green are somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks away, this side is only going to get better, especially with Daniel Safiti and David Clemmer leading the charge up front. As per Mark's predictions, he says that Newcastle will be looking to go 3 wins in a row, while the Tigers will be looking to try and start their season after 2 losses. West will be there or thereabouts for the start, but they will fade out and the Knights will capitalise, putting the foot down and run away with a 15-point win, so he is ultimately gone for a Knights 13-plus win there. The Tigers' attack is also a concern. If you think the defence is bad, the Tigers' attack is also a concern. Considering that Jacob Little has dove twice out of dummy half for 2 tries, and the only other try they've constructed was some good works between James Roberts and David Norfoluma. So there is definitely some concerns that need to be had of how the Tigers' attack is jigged at the moment. But I'm also going to go with the Knights, and I think it'll also be a 13-plus win. I think the Knights forwards are in good form at the moment, and the backs can do some real damage. So I'm also going to say a Knights 13-plus victory there. And our final game of round 3 of the NRL Telstra Premiership, we have the North Queensland Cowboys at home to the Gold Coast Titans. Now, some bad news for the Titans. Justin Holbrook has been forced into one change at least, with Ash Taylor injuring his wrist, as it were, against the Broncos last Friday night. So Tanner Boyd has been given the starting is in the 5'8" jumper for his first start of the year, alongside the co-captain Jamal Fogarty. Whilst for the Cowboys, there has been one change in the back line, with Carl Felt facing 2-week suspension, and Murray Talagi comes in to the side for his first game of the year, out on the right-hand side. Well, the Titans played very well against the Broncos. They pulled Brisbane's right edge apart defensively, as well as some very clever tries scored by Aaron Clark off the back of the Anthony Don left footer as well. The Titans weren't really troubled by the defense. As I did mention, alertness and not being complacent off a tap restart to prevent forwards like Pangai Jr. getting over the line from close range. That would be the only concern at this point in time. The Cowboys, meanwhile, they never really looked like troubling the Dragons. They had, I believe, several sets they had where they could trouble the St. George Illawarra defence, but they were unable to break it down. Definitely improvement from last week, considering Cohen Hess scored off that Jake Clifford kick. That was very well weighted, I have to say. Valentine Holmes, of course, getting that grubber kick off himself to score, and then Jake Granville, I would imagine, diving from dummy half to do so. But talking about North Queensland, they had 51% possession of the ball, but they made 10 errors at the wrong times. That's just not proper to do so. They only managed to confuse half of their kicks and 32 missed tackles with the 13 errors and the 3 penalties they did concede. So there's definitely problems for North Queensland to fix on that front. As for Mark's prediction, he reckons North Queensland did put it up against the Dragons last week at home. Yet again, they are back at home, but the Titans will be there for the win, as they did beat the big brother Brisbane last week. If the Cowboys play, in his opinion, like they did against the Dragons, but without all theirs, they should beat the Titans. But the Gold Coast are coming off a win, and so in a tight match, he reckons the Titans will beat North Queensland by 8 points. A Titans 1-12 victory. I also believe the Titans will get up here, but I'm actually going to go the other way. I'm going to say the Titans will steamroll the Cowboys, and it will be a Titans 13-plus win on that front, especially if they use their left edge of Fafita, Corey Thompson, and Philip Sammy getting a start in the centres. A dangerous prospect. Right? And to beat the Cowboys and the Broncos in consecutive weeks, it would only demonstrate, even if the Titans do not go on after this, they would still be the best team in Queensland. In theory, that is. Now, that is all the NRL fixtures out of the way. We now move on to our first round of the Betfred Super League. It will begin this weekend, and here on Fox League, but it will be available through Sky Sports. Also, you would need the Our League app to correctly get all dates and times for the fixtures available here. And we start off with a repeat of the 2019 Grand Final rematch from last year between St. Helens and the Salford Red Devils. As this is the first game of the year, I don't believe squads have been announced yet, but I can check that right now. As at this point in time, no squads have been announced for either St. Helens or the Salford side. But I can just tell you as it is. The Saints will be looking to win to go what the Roosters didn't achieve. To achieve the three-peat. Now, in the Betfred Super League, there is a precedent for teams achieving the three-peat, the Leeds Rhinos side of 2007 and 8 and 9. And that was with the World Club Challenge. Saints don't have to do the World Club Challenge in February, and their preparation ahead of this season has been largely undisturbed. And the good news is, I would imagine that Mark Percival will be available for the first time in close to a year following his battles with, I believe, his shoulder as it was. The question is, can they back up their recent 2 years of good achievement? Well, Mark reckons they could definitely do it, but they have to start their season off with a win against Salford, he reckons. With a delayed start to the season, he says that it shouldn't really affect St. Helens, as they, along with all other teams, have more time to prepare for a third straight win on that front. As for Salford, there are some questions that have to be asked, especially after losing Joe Burgess long-term, one of the fresh recruits, to be wearing the red of Salford, and he will not be available for that. Oh, and Mark has left us footnotes for game time. If you want to catch that game between Saints and Salford, all round 1, 2 games will be shown on Fox League, available at 5 a.m. on the 27th of March on the Saturday, and of course for our England viewers, if any, 6 p.m. Friday night. There's a lot of promise about Salford, but it would need to come back to execution with the halves between Lolohea and Kevin Brown, as well as adjusting to Andy Ackers as the long-term dummy half, considering Joey Lussick is now playing reserve grade for the Eels. As for his prediction, this game could go either way, as Saints and Salford have strong sides assembled. As for this, he says Saints will be hoping to continue their momentum to carry it over from 2020, while Salford will be looking to cause a round 1 upset over the reigning champions. Overall, he reckons St. Helens will get the win in round 1, but it will only be by 6 points. So he is predicting a Saints 1-12 victory. I reckon with St. Helens, their side is relatively unchanged, apart from a couple of additions on the edges and in the middle of the pack. I'm going to say also St. Helens get up with the win, but I think it's going to be another 13-plus victory, same fashion as last season. And our second game on our Saturday morning doubleheader, local time, mind you, the Lee Centurions back in the Betfred Super League for the first time in 4 seasons against the runners-up, the Wigan Warriors. Lee have done some good recruiting to try and get it up. They have taken the opportunity from the Toronto Wolfpack by recruiting many players, including Blake Wallace, Joe Mellor, and Matty Russell, while also procuring some good import talent like Brendan Elliott, a very solid fullback option, and the recent acquisition of Nathan Peets. Whether or not he starts at loose forward or off the bench with the captain Liam Hood starting at dummy half, that remains to be a question in total. As for Wigan, and as Mark has mentioned above and in an earlier episode during I believe it was our round 3 episode, you can find that on YouTube if you want to listen back to it. Wigan are one of the top 3 teams in the Betfred Super League, and looking at the side that has been put together with the return of John Bateman and the addition of Jai Field, how he is used exactly will be an interesting question, considering the spine will most likely be for round 1. Bevan French, Tommy Lualai, the skipper, Jackson Hastings, and Sam Powell at dummy half. This will be the first time Lee are back, and they will be subject to the new rule changes, which of course include the 6 again, no scrum, And this is their first game in close to a year, so there'll be a lot of pressure on John Duffy's side to perform well. As for Wigan, I expect Adrian Lamb to hit the ground running with this, so I'm going to say, and Mark has also said, that Wigan will beat the Leeds Centurions by 18 points. So he has predicted a Wigan 13 plus win. I agree. I think Wigan will get up 13 plus. Moving on to our second doubleheader over the weekend, Wakefield Trinity and the Leeds Rhinos. Wakefield, of course, coming in, having finished on the bottom end of the ladder for the second year running, just finishing above the 11th placed Hull Kingston Rovers. So definitely some questions to answer for Wakefield there. They do acquire Mason Lino from the Newcastle Knights as a replacement for Danny Bruff and for Ryan Hampshire being readjusted to fullback, I think, from the last time I saw. They'll actually play each other again. I believe Wakefield was the last opponent that the Leeds Rhinos faced before all the playoffs. Oh no, the other way around. I believe Leeds was the last opponent Wakefield faced before their season came to an abrupt end due to the ongoing coronavirus struggles in the United Kingdom. There are some problems for the Leeds Rhinos, I believe mainly with injury, considering Jack Walker, Ash Hanley, and Luke Gale, along with Robert Louis, I believe, from memory, are all unavailable with injury at this point in time. So there's a lot of depth concerns for the Leeds Rhinos. Of course, Callum McClelland and Luke Briscoe will get some opportunities early. As for Mark, he reckons Leeds will be unstoppable in this match as they try and look to hunt down St Helens and end their dominance. And he believes that Leeds will win by a massive margin of 22 points. So he's predicting a Rhinos 13 plus win there. I wish I had Mark's confidence about the Leeds Rhinos. They did make it to the playoffs for the first time in a few years, but there's a lot of missing personnel that could really strengthen Richard Agar's side at the moment, especially missing Luke Gale and Jack Walker at the back, as well as their best try scorer in Ash Hanley. I'm actually going to go the other way. I'm actually going to predict the first upset. I'm going to predict a Wakefield 1-12 victory there. And in our third and final doubleheader for round one, the Catalan Dragons against Hull Kingston Rovers. Not up there just yet. We've got two more teams after this, but we've got Catalan up against Hull KR. There's definitely a lot of talk about the Robins at the moment. I think many would have them, either them or the Leeds Centurions, as the team that finishes 12th on the table, even after Hull KR's blitz of a recruitment drive, picking up the likes of Albert Vete, Corbin Sims, England great Ryan Hall, and also Brad Takaregi. I think there's a lot of problems the Robins need to address, and the Dragons are a very strong side coming off their first semi-finals berth in, I think, close to 6 years. And with James Maloney and Josh Drinkwater running the show, with the added edge of Mike McMeekin getting his first start, as Joel Tompkins will be unavailable due to ill discipline against Leeds, I think Catalan will come up with a good start to this season, getting up over the boys from the east side of Hull, and Mark agrees that he believes Catalan has the team that can finish it off, and they will win a close game by 6 points, winning 1-12. I believe Catalan will win, but I think with the outside backs they have, such as Tom Davies, Dean Vare, and Fuad Yaha, I believe Catalan will win 13 plus. Final two games to look at. Hull FC against the Huddersfield Giants. Of course, a lot of changes for the Hull FC side with Josh Reynolds and Brett Hodgson coming in following their surprise semi-finals appearance there, and they'll be looking to back it up. Mark believes they have a very reasonable team, and coming up against Huddersfield, it'll be interesting to see how they go against the team that he feels is around about the same strength as the local rivals. As for Huddersfield, it had a lot of forward or depth improvement, the biggest coup of that, as well as signing Ian Watson. Luke Yates coming into the middle of the field in the Giants forward pack. The Giants came very, very close to finishing in the top 5, and then, of course, the extended top 6, but were let down at the back end of the season. Mark reckons, like the previous game, this is one of those close games that'll be decided, and if it comes down to the final few seconds of the match, he reckons if there is to be a winner out of this game, he believes it will be Hull FC by 2 points. So he's predicting a Hull FC 1-12 win. I see that happening again. The last time Aiden Caesar got some publicity was he going to be the next Roosters halfback, starring in a losing Huddersfield side the last time they faced Hull, and that was a 2-point win to the Black and Whites. I like the forward pack of Hull. They have definitely got their second row sorted out with Andre Savelio, Manu Ma'u, and Joe Cater being playing at loose forward, and I think Jake Connor starting at fullback in the absence of Jamie Shaw. It'll be very interesting to see how he evolves as a player, and who knows, maybe he might end up Dream Team fullback of the year if he gets to that sort of level. I will also say Hull FC run out 1-12 victors on that front. And finally, we have our final match of round 1 of the Betfred Super League, the Castleford Tigers against the Warrington Wolves. There is now incentive for the Tigers to do well this year, considering the recent announcement that Daryl Powell will be leaving the Menderhoes Jungle at the end of the year, and as speculation continues to surround who his successor will be, whether it's Brian McDermott, Tony E. Smith, or even Sean Wayne, the England coach at the moment. This is what the Tigers have to do. They have a good team on paper, but they had a lot of problems in the second stage of the 2020 season with a lot of fade-outs and narrow losses, so they need to be able to turn this one around. The question is, who starts at fullback? Is it Niall Evalds, who has been given the number 1 jumper, or Gareth O'Brien, who was the incumbent fullback for the Toronto Wolfpack at the back end of 2020, who has been named in the 16 jumper? So that's the question. Who starts at fullback for the Castleford Tigers, and how do they compensate for the loss of Mike McMeekin? Well, of course, they've already named Chase Blair in the 12 as their next choice second rower. So it'll be interesting to see how Daryl Powell addresses those problems off field. As for the Warrington Wolves, another side that could potentially make Old Trafford. And with the addition of Greg Inglis, there will be a lot of buzz about the Warrington Wolves championship prospects. Whether or not Inglis plays in round 1, it will certainly generate a lot of publicity to the game in the North if a genuine rugby league superstar is on the park. So prediction time. Where do we think this is going to go? Well, Mark's prediction is he believes that this game between the Castleford Tigers and the Warrington Wolves will be the match of the round, and it will be the edgiest seat, nail-biting and grandstand finish scenario. He reckons it'll be very hard to predict, but his final prediction, and he's going to start with the Warrington Wolves by a drop goal. So he's predicting a Warrington 1-12 victory. At the same time, the Warrington Wolves also have problems of their own. They need to be able to manage Gareth Woodard and Blake Austin to get the best out of them. The Warrington backline is very intimidating, with the likes of Ratchford, Tom Lynham, Toby King, Greg Inglis, and Josh Charnley taking their places on the outside of Austin and Widdop in the backline. The last time these two sides met, it was a very close match, and I agree with Mark's sentiment. I think the Warrington Wolves will come away 1-12 victors on that. All right, that is full time from us. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Don't forget to enjoy the third round of the NRL Telstra Premiership, and hope you're looking forward to the first round of the Betfred Super League. If you like what you hear here, please leave a like and subscribe to the Sideline Chat podcast down below, so you never miss a week of rugby league action. Join us next time as we take a look back at the round 3 and 4 debrief of the NRL. How has the Betfred Super League started off? And we give our look ahead of the Easter period of rugby league. Until then, this has been Con Marcellus, and you have been listening to the Sideline Chat podcast. Bye for now.